Good evening, everyone. My name is Marilyn Strickland, and I'm proud to represent the 10th Congressional District of Washington State. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our telephone town hall meeting if you're on the phone and online. I look forward to taking your questions and hearing directly from you about what matters most to you and your families. Since the beginning of my term, which started in January of 2021, I've been focused on dealing with the recovery from the pandemic, making sure that our economic recovery is inclusive, and just doing what we can so that all Americans have opportunity. And right now, based on what I'm hearing from folks, we know that public safety is top of mind across the South Sound and really across the nation. And that's why I've supported increasing funding for our community-oriented policing and public safety programs, including voting in favor of nearly $4 billion to support state and local law enforcement agencies so they can hire more staff and provide more training and funding. And sadly, my Republican colleagues voted against this. When we talk about crime, though, we have to also think about the cannabis businesses that voters have approved. And we know that lately they've been victims of robberies, and sadly there's been a death. To address this issue, I've been advocating in Congress for safe banking that will allow these business owners to not have to operate on a cash-only basis, which just puts them in more danger. It puts them in danger, and it puts their employees in danger. And this will allow them to operate freely, protect owners and their employees from violent crimes. I've also heard from many of you that inflation and the cost of gas is hurting South Sound families, and we hear you. And while this is a global issue, because the cost of gas and inflation is affecting countries around the world, not just in the U.S., we've been working hard with our colleagues in Congress to pass legislation that will address our supply chain challenges and really prevent big oil from exploiting consumers and making sure that you're able to try to get lower prices at the gas pump. In addition to that, I've been working with my colleagues to lower the cost of prescription drugs and insulin. I was proud to vote in favor of legislation that caps the cost of insulin at $35 a month, and I'm urging my Senate colleagues to pass this as well so that we can deliver immediate relief for South Sound residents. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that in my first year in office, I've been able to secure funding for 8 projects in our district that help address housing supply, access to clean water, pedestrian safety, a homeless youth shelter in Shelton, and a new transit center, just to name a few. And I'm very proud to have secured these funds for our communities and look forward to seeing how these projects will make life better for South Sound families. Now, no doubt, we have a long way to go in solving many of these issues that currently face our communities, and I know many of you have written my office or called my office regarding these issues and more. I look forward to discussing these further with you. I also want to let you know that my office is always here as a resource to you. To date, we've already helped hundreds of people from across the South Sound, recovering nearly $4.6 million for residents from the government. And here's what we can do. We can help navigate state and federal agencies like the Veterans Administration, Social Security, the IRS, and much more. So if you need help, always call my office at 360-459-8514, and my outstanding team will be happy to help you. So thanks so much for being here tonight. I look forward to taking your questions and hearing from you directly.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And for those who have just joined us, if you would like to ask a question, please dial *3. And for those that would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please dial *6. So we're now going to move to some of the pre-submitted questions that constituents sent in, Congresswoman, prior to the start of the town hall. This first question is from Jennifer in Pierce County. Jennifer asks, what is being done to increase public safety in the state of Washington? Congresswoman?
Great. Well, thank you for that question. And Jennifer, it's a good one because as I mentioned in my opening remarks, public safety is top of mind for a lot of people right now. And, you know, we cannot deny that crime rates have been on the rise throughout our state. And I'm very grateful for the work that our law enforcement officers and peace officers have done to work tirelessly to keep our community safe. And no doubt, we live in challenging times now. We're coming out of a pandemic. We've been in it for 2 years. And here's what this means. People are anxious. Mental and behavioral health issues are prevalent. Gun violence is on the rise. And sadly, domestic violence has increased by 8% during the pandemic. So we know that we're dealing with just a mix of a lot of things that result, sadly, in despair and crime. Now, as a former mayor myself, I understand the importance of promoting and maintaining our community's public safety. So state and local government must be at the forefront of this debate with support from the federal government. And here's what we can do to support safety. I supported increasing funding for community-oriented policing and public safety programs. In the government funding bill for 2022, which sadly Republicans voted against, there was nearly $4 billion for grants to state and local law enforcement, an increase of $500 million. And this includes $674 million for the Burn Justice Grant, the JAG program, $500 million for community-oriented policing, the COPS program, and also, too, public safety is a comprehensive issue. It's about making sure that we are providing education and awareness and investing in domestic violence prevention efforts. We must invest in social services. We must invest in mental health and behavioral health services. And of course, we want to make sure that we are creating as many good paying jobs as possible. Again, so much of what happens around violence is hopelessness and despair, and we want to make sure that we're doing things to prevent it, but also supporting law enforcement so that they can respond. I was proud to support the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which provides resources to support survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. But thank you for that question. It's a very important one.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman. So again, for folks that just joined us on the phone, if you would like to ask a question, please dial *3. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please dial *6. Again, that's *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to the newsletter. So Congresswoman, this next question is from David in Thurston County. David asks, is it fair to those who save for their children's college to allow those who borrow to have their student loans paid off and not provide some relief to those who acted responsibly, saved for college, and didn't take loans?
That's a really good question, David. And, I was one of those college students who attended college during a time when it was affordable, and I was a beneficiary of the GI Bill because my father was a veteran. And everyone gets to college in a different way. And so, when we talk about fairness, I think there are a few things we need to discuss. And, I want to clarify, too, President Biden never during his campaign promised to eliminate all student debt. He did not do that. But there have been good conversations about what he's willing to do, and he's already done a lot to begin with. He has, forgiven debt for people who had student loan debt from who now work in the public sector. He's forgiven loans for people who actually were students at predatory colleges, and so there's some good work that's already happened. But back to your question, David, is it fair? I think that, we have to look at who can afford to pay off their loans, but I think the bigger question here, what is the structural problem that we're trying to address? It shouldn't be so expensive to go to college, David, and there should not be predatory lending involved if someone wants to get money for tuition. And so I would say that, college costs aren't what they used to be. Back in the day when I was in college, room, board, and tuition was about $10,000. In 2019, that cost is nearly $30,000, and that's at a public institution. And so a lot of these families are reliant on government programs like income-based repayment, allowing them to make loan payments at a level that is affordable to them. So I do believe that we need to look at, interest rates, predatory lending, and finding a way for people to repay what they can. Again, I know the president does want to erase some debt at a certain level, and then Congress also has the opportunity as the legislators to bring forth laws as well.
Thanks for that, Congresswoman. So for this next question, it's from Jack. And Jack is asking, what can be done to achieve access to high-speed internet in rural portions of Thurston County?
Right. Well, that's a very good question, and I was very involved in, trying to expand access to broadband even during my time as mayor of Tacoma. So here's the reality. When it comes to getting high-speed internet service, companies are going to make a calculation about whether it is cost-effective. And in some rural communities where the population isn't as dense, the math isn't going to work for them. The good news is that in the infrastructure plan that we passed, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, a big part of this includes expansion of broadband. So the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Grant Program will provide about $42 billion to plan, deploy, and adopt broadband. And the priority for these funds, Jack, will go to projects that reach underserved locations. Another program we have is the Rural Broadband Access and Loan Program, which will provide about $74 million to expand high-speed broadband into rural areas. And then another program is in Washington State, for example, Broadband in Washington, where at least there'll be $100 million in formula funding for Washington for competitive grants. Here's the other thing that's important, though. We can build out the service to people's homes, but people have to be able to afford to pay for the service. And that's why we're very pleased that there's the Accessible Affordable Internet Act for All, which is going to make it accessible and affordable to all families. So we will continue to look at these programs as they're built out. We want to learn what's working well and what's not. But at the end of the day, we know that to fully participate in society in the 21st century, you have to have access to high-speed internet. We learned this during the pandemic as students were trying to learn and do their lessons online. In some communities that don't have hospitals or healthcare clinics, rural medicine is very dependent on having high-speed broadband. You use it to pay your bills. People apply for jobs. You just need access to high-speed broadband the way we need access to water and electricity and clean water. So thanks for that question.
Thanks, Congresswoman. And yeah, you've been hearing about access to broadband ever since you took office. And actually, this next question is also something that you've been hearing a lot from constituents on throughout the district. The question is from Tom. And Tom is asking, what are you doing to help seniors not lose their home due to out-of-control tax increases each year?
Great. Well, thank you for that question, Tom. I think about my mother who lives in the house that I grew up in and how over the last 5 or 6 years, the value of that house has increased dramatically. But luckily for her, she is a senior citizen within a certain income level. So through her county assessor's office, she qualifies for low-income discounts. And so the first thing I would say is check with your county treasurer assessor's office to see if you qualify for any sort of senior discount. But here's the reality. We have a housing shortage in the South Sound. And when there is a premium and when there is a shortage of housing, the prices go up. In addition to that, the value goes up. When the value goes up, the taxes you pay go up. And so we just want to make sure that seniors have access to the assessor treasurer's senior discount program. Take advantage of it. A lot of people still don't know about it. And I said the other thing, too, is really looking at, how much cash are we putting into the pockets of senior citizens? How are they saving money? I was proud to have co-sponsored the Fair COLA for Seniors Act, which will look at the cost of living for Social Security, understanding that it's different in every market, and we want to make sure that the annual COLA that we use actually is reflective of the cost of living increase. That's one way to do it. And then also, too, just co-sponsoring legislation that's going to boost benefits across the board and expand them while maintaining solvency of Social Security. This will lift our lowest income seniors out of poverty, and it will help millions of low and moderate income seniors, especially women and people of color. Now, some of my colleagues want to completely privatize Social Security and gut Medicare. I vehemently oppose that, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that Social Security stays intact and that we are adjusting it to the cost of living that is real.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman. And for folks who have joined us on the line, just a reminder that if you would like to ask a question, please dial *3. Again, that's *3 to ask a question. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please dial *6. Congresswoman, I wanted to ask you, just kind of, building on that, kind of what have your, I'm going to go to the next question. Apologies, Congresswoman. So this next question is from Jeff from Pierce County. Jeff is asking why the Nisqually River Bridge that you toured recently with the Nisqually tribe and Governor Inslee and Senator Cantwell was allowed to deteriorate to the point that it now needs to be replaced.
Jeff, my honest answer is that when it comes to maintaining our infrastructure in the United States, we just don't do a good job. But it doesn't mean we can't do better moving forward. And one big step in that direction was actually passing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. But, if you saw in the news where the senator and the governor and I were touring it, we were on the river and we saw firsthand the state of this bridge. So why was it allowed to deteriorate? I would say a few things. It wasn't a priority on the state transportation plan. And I think that, by bringing attention to it, we've now elevated its profile. And, a study had to be done. So we just received results from a planning and environmental linkage study. And we're going to look for a path forward to get this done once and for all. And I would say, just as a former elected official at the local level, because there are so many different bridges and roads and infrastructure that needs improvement, we tend to look for a route that cuts costs. And sometimes when you do that, you end up compromising the quality. So instead of building something that's going to last a very, very, very long time, we end up having to repair things. And so as we look at this particular project, yes, of course, cost is important. We want to make sure we're responsible. But I want us to say to ourselves, what is going to be the best possible solution to deal with possible flooding, to make sure that this is going to stay safe, that it addresses salmon conservation, tribal treaty rights, and of course, because of JBLM, national security. So I look forward to continuing to advocate for this project. I know that Senator Cantwell has made this a priority too, and we're going to do this right before it's too late.
Thanks so much, Congresswoman. So we have one more question in this section where we're reviewing some of the pre-submitted questions. And this question is from Colleen from Thurston County. Colleen is asking you, do you support and will you co-sponsor H.R. 6849, the Supporting All Veteran Families Act? The act extends benefits to surviving spouses of LGBTQ veterans, as well as removes the phrase hold oneself out as married, which essentially equates cohabitation with common law marriage, which is neither federally recognized nor recognized in the state of Washington and is used to accuse surviving spouses of fraudulently collecting VA benefits.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Colleen. So much of the work that I have done during my time as elected official is all about equity, fairness, and opportunity, and treating all people with respect and dignity and equal protection of the law. So yes, I do support H.R. 6849, and while I'm not an official co-sponsor yet, I am definitely supportive of this effort in supporting all LGBTQ veterans, service members, and their families. I help co-sponsor the Voices for Veterans Act, which will expand the Advisory Committee on Minority Veterans to include lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, non-binary, and gender non-conforming veterans. I also co-sponsored a bill to establish a commission to conduct an investigation into historic and ongoing impacts on LGBTQ service members and veterans resulting from unjust military policy and practice. And again, we've seen the Supreme Court's draft opinion about Roe v. Wade, and we know that our fundamental rights are being eroded. And so we want to make sure that we are strengthening marriage equality, that we are fighting for it, and also making sure that, we are treating all people with respect and dignity, and again, equal protection of the law.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. So as I mentioned, this wraps up our first section of pre-submitted questions that came in this past week. And now we're actually going to open up to live questions. And this is just a reminder for everyone who's listening that if you would like to ask a question, please dial *3, and someone will help you get that question in the queue. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please press *6. So I believe the first question that we have up, Congresswoman, is they want you to address why Washington State doesn't have an equal pay law.
That's a really interesting question, and it's something that the state legislature should take up. We know that in Congress, the House has taken it up repeatedly, and then it doesn't do well in the Senate. And so I absolutely believe that we should do something at the state level, especially given, some of the challenges that we're having in Congress. And, I was a co-sponsor of the Equal Pay, Equal Work Act, and this would reestablish the National Equal Pay Enforcement Task Force, which did exist during the Obama-Biden administration. And this task force is going to bring together government agencies to limit any potential gaps in enforcement and equal pay laws. And here's what's interesting, too. When we pass laws about equity and inclusion, we can pass the law, but there has to be an enforcement component. And so what I like about this approach is that, we can pass a law, but we want to make sure that we actually have the resources to staff for enforcement. And obviously, I'm supporting equal pay legislation at the federal level, and I really do hope that my colleagues in Olympia will take steps to ensure equality here in Washington State for employees.
Great. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. So our next question actually has to do with something that you've seen a couple tours of, and you've talked about throughout some of your visits throughout Washington's 10 over the last 18 months. And the question is, how will government power all new EV stations?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, we did pass a significant amount for electric vehicle charging stations, and recognizing that, every community is in a different stage when it comes to how far along they are. But this is a really important question because we have to build out our energy infrastructure as we transition to more vehicles being charged, being powered by electricity. And here's something that some people may not know. I've had a meeting with the automobile manufacturers. They want to sell electric vehicles. In fact, in the United States, less than 2% of the cars sold are EVs. So there's tons of upside potential. But we have to have the charging infrastructure, which means we have to have the charging grid to do that. And as we move to being fully carbon neutral, I am confident that EV charging stations will be powered by renewable electricity. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is the biggest investment in clean energy in American history. $71 million is going to go directly to Washington State, which can help upgrade transmission lines and expand clean energy. There's also $700 million for upgrading our existing hydropower resources to make dams efficient, which is critical for Washington. So really, it's looking at where the states are, looking at their power grids, asking ourselves, how much more load do we need to increase for more EV charging stations for cars? But also, too, I'll just kind of editorialize a bit here, too. I mean, people are still not 100% confident of how long a charge will last. And so we need more people buying these automobiles, using them, serving as, providing testimony for how good they can be, and that way we can transition. But we do need to have the power grid to accommodate the load.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. So we are going to open up so folks on the phone can answer you or ask you your question directly. So the next person we're going to go to is Bob from Lakewood. I believe you had a question for the Congresswoman.
Hi, Bob.
Hello. Thank you for having me and everyone else here. And thank you for your regular newsletter, which helps to keep me up to date on some things. I've recently sent you some information, and I wanted to bring up the issue that veterans are dying every day because they're illegally stripped of their benefits by bad attorneys and even public employees of the state. And so I want to know if you are aware of how bad the pressure is on military and veteran families when predatory attorneys are going after them and basically ruining them financially.
Yeah, thank you for raising awareness of that. I think for some people, when they think of veterans, they think it's, everything's easy after you've served your country. And veterans are often, sadly, some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. And so, our district has been very aggressive and very responsive to helping veterans on a day-to-day basis. And as you probably know, the VA system can be complicated, convoluted, and sometimes so demoralizing that people just give up, right? And so we want to make sure that we're providing the type of service that our veterans need so that they maintain hope. They maintain hope and understand we're going to do everything in our power to solve this problem for you. Now, I was proud that we led a delegation-wide letter asking the Veterans Administration to address unacceptable wait times for veterans trying to access health care. And we stand ready to help any way we can. I can't sit here and guarantee that we'll solve every single problem, but we have skilled, experienced people here in my district office who know the VA, they have relationships, and so we want to make sure that anyone who feels vulnerable or needs some help navigating the system, please call our office. This is one of the basic services that we provide in a district office, especially in this community with such a large veteran population. But thank you for bringing attention to that, and thank you for the opportunity to try and answer it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. So, Congresswoman, we're going to take a question from Penny in Olympia. Penny.
Hi, Penny.
Hi. I'm just furious about this Roe versus Wade thing, and I want to know, I know there's something in the Senate right now that they're trying to get through, but I want to know what's going on in both the House and Senate and what the chances are to get something through the legislature.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. So, as we know, we were all shocked when we heard about what this thing, some of us weren't as shocked, but we heard about what happened with Roe v. Wade. And the House, as usual, did pass something that would codify Roe v. Wade and make access to reproductive health and abortion. It would keep it intact. Now, the one good news that I can tell you about it is Washington State, you can still get safe and legal access to abortion and reproductive health. So that's great for Washington State. But If it's not available in surrounding states, people will travel to Washington State. It will put stress on our system, and it will affect our ability to serve and help people. And we have to make sure that, every one of us is represented by a government for and by the people, where the rights and freedoms are protected. And this is about body autonomy, but this is also about control and policing of women's bodies. So it's important for us to codify Roe v. Wade. I will keep fighting until every person, no matter where they live, how much money they make, what they look like, has the freedom to make their own decisions about their lives and their futures. But the Senate can and must act now. This is incredibly important. And then also, too, I want to point something out because, you think about the way the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. Then they came after Roe v. Wade. And it is not that far-fetched to think that the makeup of this Supreme Court will come after marriage equality, gay marriage, interracial marriage, even something that seems as, written in stone as Brown versus Board of Education, the responsibility of providing a fair public education to all students. And so for me, this is absolutely about body autonomy, Roe v. Wade, violating our basic rights. But also what scares me is that this is opening the door to more violation of our rights, and we're not going to be protected.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Appreciate that. And so I believe our next question is from Emmanuel in Shelton. Do you want to come online and ask the Congressman your question?
Sure. Are you there?
Hi, Emmanuel. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Just sitting here with my father and my son right now relaxing. We just got a trip back from California and just retired from the Navy, and I'm back home in my hometown brought back my wife from California and my son. And we're just wondering, as newcomers back to Washington State after being away for 20 years, what's the plan for Shelton and the greater Mason County area going forward over the next year or so, as far as infrastructure or what is kind of going to be your office's approach and focus, just so kind of we know what we're getting into as a family?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your service and welcome back to Washington State. I presume you were down in San Diego?
Actually, I was stationed out in 29 Palms, which is Marine Corps Base 29 Palms was my last duty station, ma'am.
Excellent. So, so as far as, what is happening in Shelton and Mason County, my role as a federal official is really to look to the local leadership and say to them, okay, how can we support you? How can we assist you? So, one thing obviously that we're proud of is that, we passed the infrastructure bill, which is going to make investments in rural broadband. And we know that, places like Shelton and Mason County aren't as densely populated, and so getting access to high-speed, affordable broadband is so incredibly important, and that's going to help Shelton and Mason County. And we're in touch with their leadership regularly, like Commissioner Trask, on ways that our office can support their grant applications for more resources. I had a chance to visit a YMCA out there, which is going to serve as a major community center. It's going to be pretty exciting. They're going to have this amazing outdoor pool, social services under one roof, and really just trying to promote recreation. I did a tour of a big intersection, kind of like coming off the freeway, and they're trying to really look at traffic calming around this big, retail area. So I think that, as the population in Shelton and Mason County increases, they have to have infrastructure investments to accommodate the growth. And people are discovering that, Shelton and Mason County have a beautiful views, good quality of life, and I want to do what I can to support, again, local government's plans and finding out how we can make sure that the broadband especially gets built out in Mason County.
Great. Thanks, Congresswoman. Yeah, you've actually been out to Shelton and Mason County many times this past 18 months. I know those were just a couple of your tours. I know that you consistently talk to Commissioner Trask and hear about what's going on. You've talked about addressing some of the broadband issues in Mason County, some of their infrastructure needs. I think they talked to you about a roundabout as well. So, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
growing community.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe our next question is from Theodore in Lacey. Theodore, you're on the line with the Congresswoman.
Yes. Good afternoon, Congresswoman. I have a general question overall. I'm a strong Democrat, and basically my question has to deal with our think tanks for the Democratic Party, and I'm really concerned about our messaging for the people so we can maintain the House and the Senate, and then also in a couple of years the presidency there. But that's my main concern, and my question is, like, who do we have for these type of individuals that's helping us out to do this? To me, we're just like about a year behind the Republicans, you might say, and we got to catch up and surpass them. I mean, I just want to cement our stronghold over them so our messaging can get through, because I believe the Democratic Party does represent the people as opposed to what the Republicans do.
Yeah, so thank you for your question, and you raise a couple of really good issues. You know, when you look at public opinion with the policies that the Democrats want to put forward, more people agree with us than any other. That's a fact, whether it is housing, Social Security, reducing the cost of prescription drugs, doing things to provide more funding through the Department of Justice to support our police departments. The public is with us on these things. But oddly enough, the messaging itself can get really convoluted because people get their information from so many different places and it comes in so many different directions. But I will say this, and to your point, you know, the Democrats have a good story to tell. You know, when President Biden took office, we were in a deep recession, people were out of work, and now unemployment is down, wages are up. We have a lot of people who've been vaccinated. We're coming out of this pandemic, and so there is a lot of good to talk about. But I would also say, to your point, you know, we need those of you in our communities who have benefited from some of these things like the American Rescue Plan to tell people why it was a good idea. We need people to talk about how we were able to, you know, start to build out broadband. Some of these are major things that are going to be in the infrastructure plan, and talking about, you know, people going to work in jobs that pay well. And so I would say that, you know, we need messengers like you on the ground, talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, and just really making the case. But overall, I'll come back to this. The policies that Democrats support are wildly popular with the general public. But the question is, how do we help people understand all the good that we've done and all the good that we're doing? When Democrats are in charge, the economy is stronger. When Democrats are in charge, we create more jobs. When Democrats are in charge, our executives are good crisis managers. We need to tell that story, and we need people like you to help us tell it. But thank you for a fantastic question.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Theodore. Just a reminder to folks who are listening in, if you would like to ask a question, please dial *3. Again, to ask a question, it's *3. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please dial *6. So, Congresswoman, I believe our next question is from Helen in Spanaway. Helen, you're on the line.
Hi,
Helen. Thanks for taking my call. I just wonder if there's any reasoning with our governor as far as the state gas tax, because it's like 49 cents a gallon, and the federal, you know, tax is 18 cents a gallon. And it makes it hard for people to go to their jobs, especially with traffic the way it is and waiting on the freeway.
Yeah, that is being stuck in traffic is a horrible thing, and we know that especially in the South Sound, it happens to us too often. But, you know, I cannot tell you, I cannot read the mind of the governor, but I know that high gas prices right now are attributable to one person and one person alone, and his name is Vladimir Putin. And I'm going to explain why this is important. Because of his aggression toward Ukraine, this unjust war, these violent attacks, the instability in oil prices around the world, the markets are responding to this. And I was proud to co-sponsor the Stop Gas Price Gouging Tax and Rebate Act to prevent big oil from exploiting consumers and to lower the price that you pay at the pump. Now, Congress's actions give the administration authority to cut off Russian energy imports, and that's a move to defend freedom and democracy in Ukraine around the world. Mm-hmm. This administration has actually taken action to lower summer gas prices by issuing a waiver that's going to allow wider sales of ethanol-rich gasoline, and that'll save consumers about 40 cents a gallon based on current prices, and this will take place over the summer. But again, the markets around the world are responding to the aggression of Vladimir Putin. When markets are unstable, when there's uncertainty, supply chains are disrupted and production just is hurt around the world. And also, too, I want to make sure that you understand something. The CEOs and people from some of the largest gas companies in the world have been on record, and they have said they have no intention of increasing the gas supply, and they are focused on shareholder profits. So basically, they're gouging us. So there are many ways we can try and address this. And again, I can't read the mind of Governor Inslee, but I can tell you what we're trying to do at the federal level and making sure that people understand Vladimir Putin's unjust, violent war is causing the global marketplace to respond to this aggression, and it's disrupting supply and production for people across the globe. Gas prices are high all over the world right now, unfortunately. And sadly, we're feeling it here at home in our pocketbooks when we go fill up our cars.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So next we have a question from Irene in Olympia. Irene, you're on the line with the Congresswoman.
Hi, Irene.
Thank you for taking my call. I am a survivor of domestic violence, got a restraining order that expires in 2099. So here's my question. If they can violate that and don't want to help mothers who are supporting their children and the rent is so high that they can't afford rent, where's the help for us single parents trying to raise our children? And when we can't even afford the rent, when rent doubles and the landlord says, I don't care.
No, first of all, I am sorry that you had to suffer through domestic violence, and I admire you for being strong and courageous and trying to, raise your kids on your own. And, we had the child tax credit, and that was passed as part of the American Rescue Plan, and this tax credit was very, very helpful to a lot of families. And unfortunately, the Republicans refused to support this policy to extend it, and it was allowed to lapse. Now, when we look at this particular child tax credit, it's going to put money into your pocket, and it's going to help really address the fact that people need more cash to pay their bills. And I will still come back to one thing, right? Families are still hurting right now. We know what's needed, and sadly, in a place like the 10th Congressional District in Washington State, because we have such a low supply of housing, it is so expensive. And so there are a couple things we need to do. We need to build more housing as soon as possible. We need to extend the child tax credit so it's permanent. And we need to do what we can to support local families like yours, for example, who've escaped a horrible situation and are just trying to make ends meet. But, I know it's hard for you. We know what we need to do. And what we need to do really is say to ourselves, your situation should not be a partisan issue. Every person who cares about families should be voting yes to extend the child tax credit. So I will keep doing this work, but again, we have to work together because some people are simply unwilling to pass this.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I believe we have a question from Gary. Gary in Lakewood.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Congressman Strickland. Thank you for having me join your town hall tonight. My question's pretty well simple. I believe the solution's probably going to be quite complicated. I go back to public safety. Okay, we have the relationship between police and the community has been just destroyed since 2020, and I'm a firm believer in solving problems from the bottom up. That means from the community up. I don't think we can elect one president that's going to cure all. What can you do? What can we do to restore relationships between the community and the police so there's not all this standoffishness all the time? And that's what I believe is what creates a lot of the violent problems. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Oh, I completely understand. I'm a former mayor, and, I know firsthand how challenging and complicated relationships can be. And, there are a few things I just want to put out there. The vast majority of people who serve in law enforcement are there for the right reasons, and they are doing the right thing. And everybody, regardless of your background or zip code, wants to be safe. We all want to live in safe neighborhoods. It's a basic human need that we have. And so I would say that, just from what I've observed kind of from my purview as a member of Congress, is that there's a lack of trust between communities and police, and we have to find a way to reestablish that and really looking at, what do we have in common? Everybody wants to be safe. And at the same time, being safe doesn't mean that people aren't held accountable. One of the things that I am a big fan of is providing grants at the federal level for smaller communities that may not have the budgetary ability to pay for body cameras. I co-sponsored a bipartisan Cops on the Beat grant program reauthorization, which is going to reauthorize this program and will allow COPS grants to be used for the purpose of increasing the compensation and hiring more law enforcement officers. And as I mentioned earlier, too, in my comments, law enforcement is a very important and crucial part of public safety, no doubt, but you also have to get to the root causes of crime as well. So investing in our social safety net, providing jobs that pay well, helping people get over feeling desperate and hopeless that makes them cause crime. And in the end, accountability for everyone. Accountability for people who commit crimes, accountability for the police officers who may overstep their authority. But really, this is about building trust. And I tell folks that, policing is a local government issue, but what can we do at the federal government to support the work that local government is trying to do?
Well, thank you for that, Congresswoman, and thank you for that question, Gary. So we're going to go to Barbara from Olympia. Barbara, you want to ask your question?
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. I'm another woman who's furious about the Roe v. Wade situation, but my call is about how outraged I am about Putin in Ukraine. So my question basically is, when is the United States going to directly fight with Russia? We're supplying weapons and intelligence and, have the economic sanctions that I don't think we morally can just stand by and watch it happen and be as out of control as it is. So are we going to war?
Thank you for your question. So undoubtedly, Putin's unjust invasion of Ukraine and attempted takeover of this sovereign nation that undermines democracy threatens the entire global community. It threatens democracy, it threatens the global economy. And, we just got out of Afghanistan. We just pulled troops out of Afghanistan. So this administration is not about to put troops on the ground in Ukraine because this is going to literally trigger World War III. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is an attempted takeover of a sovereign nation, and we are doing everything we can to provide Ukrainian people and those who are fighting on the ground help. Speaker Pelosi was here in the South Sound yesterday, and she was asked this question by a reporter. And she said, there are a couple things we're doing. We're providing humanitarian assistance. We're doing what we can to address the food shortages. And she said, weapons, weapons, weapons. And, committing to a no-fly zone or direct aggression against Russia is an act of war. We need to give Ukraine and the NATO allies what they need to defend themselves and to support Ukraine. And the Ukrainian people are amazing. They have so much resolve. They are going to do what they can. But again, in a bipartisan way, we are prepared to send weapons, vehicles, and needed resources. And here's the deal. When Vladimir Putin marched his troops into Kyiv, he thought it was going to be a 3-day war. Here we are. What he has done, instead of tearing us apart, he has brought Democrats and Republicans and the world together against him. So we're doing what we can. We're soon going to vote to send an additional $33 billion in supplemental funding, and $20 billion of that is military and security assistance. And also, too, I remind folks that, everything that's happening in this situation isn't just what you see on TV. So there's a lot of work happening, and we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the Ukrainian people and give them the resources that we need. But we do not have any plans to put American troops on the ground at this time.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So, Congresswoman, you had so much interest in this town hall. We actually received so many pre-submitted questions, and we're actually going to pivot back to a couple of the questions that were submitted over the last week. And for folks on the line who would like to ask a question, we're going to come back and ask live questions. So in the interim, if you'd like to get in the line or get in the queue, so to speak, please dial *3 to ask a question. So, Congresswoman, this next question came from Dennis a couple days ago. Dennis lives in Pierce County. He's asking what can be done to fill lower-paying jobs in the service industry.
Well, thank you for that question, Dennis. And, it's an interesting question because, you think about what happened to a lot of these jobs during the pandemic when we were not physically able to go to places. And so a lot of businesses, were struggling. We did what we can from the congressional standpoint to push money to a lot of these businesses, but a lot of them struggled. And I want to share a data point with you. 2 million women left the workforce during the pandemic because they don't have affordable access to child care, elder care, or care for their disabled relatives. And I don't know how many people have returned. And just, a lot of people right now, they're just rethinking their life choices. And so what we can do to help fill some of these entry-level or lower-paying jobs, number one, is look at the market, right? If people aren't coming to work, there may be some adjustments that we have to make in pay. But through that, are we able to support the businesses for their needs to actually, spend more money on salaries and benefits? And one thing that I was proud to do was that, I was a leader on ensuring that the restaurant revitalization funds are disseminated properly and getting to the businesses that applied during the first round and didn't have a chance to get access to those funds. So we want to replenish this fund and provide additional financial relief. And, this same spirit should hold true for all service industries. Again, some of the hardest hit industries during COVID, during the economic downturn. So again, expanding career and technical education programs through partnerships, offering high school credit opportunities for workers to help create multiple pathways to graduation, paid internships, I'm a big fan of that, but also making sure that the businesses are stable as well. But it's a very, complicated problem, but, the reality is a lot of people left the workforce, and because of many factors, they're not coming back. So we have to make this more attractive and really think about what it's going to take to get people back to these jobs.
Great. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. So Ashley in Pierce County submitted a question a couple days ago, and it's an issue that we haven't touched on yet this town hall. She's asking you, is anything being done to protect voting rights?
Oh, my goodness. So this is interesting, especially on the heels of what we think may happen with Roe v. Wade. And I pointed out earlier that the Supreme Court, did harm the Voting Rights Act. And even getting it renewed, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, something that the Senate had done for a long time, is hard to get done. So luckily in Washington State, we have mail-in voting. We have mail-in voting that is postage paid, and we have a system that works. It's accessible, and our secretaries of state want to ensure that every single person who wants to vote has access to the ballot box. But on a national level, we know that's not true everywhere. There are states across the country that are passing draconian laws. They're taking away voting precincts, removing ballot boxes. They refuse to do early voting. So clearly, there are efforts across the country to try to keep people from voting. And unfortunately, it has a disproportionate impact on communities of color, on places where younger people live, and where people who are low income live. The Senate must pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and the Protecting Our Democracy Act, all of which I co-sponsored. And so this issue is too important, and I will continue to fight to ensure that public interest comes first in our democracy, not special interest, and that everyone's voice is heard at the ballot box. Encouraging more people to vote does not favor one party over the other. It is a fundamental right. It is a basic right. And instead of rolling back voting rights like some of the states are doing, we at the federal level must promote and protect and defend our constitutional rights.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So this next question is from Francisco. He's asking you, how can veterans get assistance from you or your office regarding VA claim appeals submitted to the VA regarding disagreements with VA decisions?
Great. Well, Francisco, thank you for that question. I spoke about this a little earlier. So a lot of people may not know this, but one of the core functions of a district congressional office is to work on VA issues. And I said earlier, we have experienced staff here. They know the system. They have relationships. So this is what we're here to do. So if you want to get help from my office, give us a call at 360-459-8514. Send an email to us at strickland.house.gov submitting a contact request, and let us know what we can do. So far, in the year and a half that I've been in Congress, we've recovered over $72,000 for veterans and service members in my district alone. And I'm sure that there'll be more opportunities to recover more. And as a reminder, my office can help with Veterans Administration issues and other federal agencies, because I can tell you, it is those agencies can be very, very hard to navigate. So everything from Social Security benefits to the child tax credit to the VA, anything you need, please make sure you call our office and let me have our incredible staff work on navigating the system for you. But this is why we're here. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I'm going to do one last of the pre-submitted questions before we're going to go back and take a couple of live questions before we need to probably get you to your next event. So this question is from Jeffrey in Pierce County. He's asking you, what are you doing to secure the southern border?
Well, great, Jeffrey, thank you for that question. So, in Washington State, we are at least 1,000 miles and some change away from the southern border. But I will tell you that, recently on our government spending bill, which I did vote for, and which not one Republican voted for, we were providing funding specifically for border security. And I want to break down what we approved. $14.8 billion to fund the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, $256 million for technology for the border, $8.26 billion for ICE, $25 million for safety improvements of ICE and Border Patrol agents. So the Democrats understand the importance of this, and in our recent bill, we actually approved all these expenditures. But I want to say something, too, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We cannot lift restrictions without long-lasting, comprehensive immigration reform and a real commitment from this administration about what their plan is going forward. We have a very piecemeal, disorganized immigration policy, and we need to take a breath and say, okay, how will this policy look? And I want to remind folks, too, immigration in the U.S. is not just about the southern border. Around 18%, if that, of people who come to the U.S. come through the southern border. So it's also about immigration, about fairness, about our workforce and our economy. Remember, we depend on talent of our immigrants, and we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful and imaginative about it. And with worker shortages throughout our economy, every single sector I speak with says we can't find enough workers. Comprehensive immigration reform can help fill in the gaps, bring prices down, and ensure economic prosperity for all, especially people who live here in the U.S. This is not a way to provide jobs for people who are not native born. It's a way for us to recognize our economy depends on immigrants. So again, we've approved billions of dollars worth of funding for immigration. We need comprehensive immigration reform. And again, immigration is not just about the southern border because, again, less than 18% of the people who come through that southern border. It's about our workforce, the economy, and the promise of what this country is supposed to be.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So we are going to go back to some live questions. So let's see here. Vicki from Olympia, you are on the line to ask your question to Congresswoman Strickland.
Hi, Vicki.
Hi, Congresswoman. Thank you very much for serving for us, and thank you for allowing me time to ask my question tonight. I know you're on the Transportation Committee. As a person who's commuted previously from Olympia to Seattle, what are plans for a possible commuter train that can hook Olympia up to the Sounder that takes people from Tacoma up? What are we doing to get from Olympia to maybe even just Tacoma?
Yeah, so during my time as mayor, I served on 2 public transit boards. I was both on the board of Pierce Transit and Sound Transit itself. And so this issue is incredibly important. And as you know, this region in the South Sound is growing every day. And I'd say there are a few things that I would like to see happen. Number one, we shouldn't have to go to Seattle to get access to a high-wage job. And so there are opportunities for some of these large employers to talk about moving jobs down here to the South Sound. There's that. But also, too, I'm very proud that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that we just passed is going to make the largest investment in our nation's transit system in decades, $108 billion for federal public transportation programs. And also, too, I was able to get through community-directed spending the funding for Pierce Transit Spanaway Transit Center. I understand that Intercity Transit is working on some things as well, and, we need more HOV lanes that go up and down the South Sound as well. But, I think you're right about, just needing to connect the southern part of the South Sound with the Tacoma area and the bigger metropolitan area, what I call the Metro Seattle area, which is what we're part of. But I would say investing more in transit, looking at HOV lanes, recognizing that population density is happening and we need to make investments in advance before we have a crisis, and then also to co-locating some of those high-wage jobs away from Seattle and Bellevue and saying we have talent down here that's commuting to Seattle. We have an opportunity to help employ people down here. It's good for the environment, it's good for people's quality of life, and it doesn't require you to be involved in a soul-crushing commute.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So folks on the phone, we are running low on time, so we have time for one last question, and this question will be from Louise in Tenino. Louise, you're on the line.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thank you for taking my question, Congresswoman Strickland. It's kind of a simple question. What have you done to bring back energy independence like we had in 2020 that gave us very low gas prices, propane prices, and natural gas prices?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, I come back to this unjust war that's happening in Ukraine that has literally disrupted the entire supply chain. And I feel your pain. I understand what it's like to pay more for gas and energy. This is a significant issue and affects every single person in our district. And to be honest with you, this is not necessarily about our nation's production capacity. The U.S. is the world's largest producer of oil at about 12 million barrels per day, and we account for 13% of global production. Less than 1/4 of the U.S. oil produced in the U.S. comes from federal lands and waters. And on this land, oil producers have in their hands already 9,000 ready approved permits, and they are choosing not to use them. And I come back to the comment that I made earlier about CEOs of large companies. Exxon and Mobil have gone on record to say they do not plan to increase supply, and they plan to focus on shareholder value. And also, too, we're the world's largest natural gas producer, and we export both natural gas and oil. And so I would say, some of the things that we're doing, I mentioned earlier, what the Biden administration is doing to lower prices at the pump this summer by issuing a waiver allowing wider sales of ethanol-rich gasoline, which is going to save consumers about 40 cents per gallon. And then also, too, co-sponsoring the Stop Gas Price Gouging Tax and Rebate Act to prevent big oil from exploiting consumers, because that's exactly what's happening. But again, no one likes paying more at the pump. It is affecting all of us. But this isn't necessarily about what the U.S. is doing as far as capacity goes. The fact that we have producers sitting on approved permits that they are choosing not to use. I mean, that's something that we have to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And thank you, everyone who either pre-submitted questions for tonight's town hall or hung on the line to ask your question this evening. It was great to hear from all of you. And Congresswoman, I know before you go, you wanted to say a couple of words.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for spending the last hour with me. I love hearing from people in our district, and I tell folks that when you're in Washington, D.C., it's easy to get in this bubble, and you kind of get away from what people really need here at home, and that's why these telephone town halls are so important. So thank you to everyone who has been listening. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I'm sorry if we didn't get to it, but at the end of the day, when I go to Washington, D.C., and I'm working here at home, I am fighting for a nation that is safe, that is just, and that is secure. That is the promise of what this country represents. And right now, we've got some challenging times. I mean, yes, we're coming through the pandemic. Yes, unemployment is down, wages are up, but people are feeling anxious. They're feeling uncertain. And we cannot deny that people are worried about the cost of living, getting access to medication that they can afford, and addressing the housing crisis that we have here in the South Sound. So I'm working every day with partners. I will work with anyone who wants to work with me, but I say this. When you have good people in government who want to do the right thing and take the right votes that put people first, that's when things can work. So thank you for the opportunity for me to be here today. Again, it's an honor and a privilege to represent the 10th District. And call our office if you need any help with the VA, with Social Security, with the IRS. We are here to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you again for everyone joining us this evening. If you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter, please press *6. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.